This story is bound to give you chills. It's about a cruise my wife Debbie and I took to celebrate our 5th wedding anniversary back in July of 2018. It started off as a dream vacation but quickly turned into something unexplainable. We boarded the cruise ship with excitement and high hopes. The sun was shining, the sea was calm, and we couldn't wait to explore all the amenities the ship had to offer. Our cabin was cozy, with a small balcony that overlooked the ocean. It was absolutely perfect. On the first night, we decided to hit the ship's main dining room for dinner. The food was amazing, really delicious, and we enjoyed our fantastic meal. As we were finishing our dessert, another couple approached our table. They introduced themselves as Mark and Lisa. They seemed friendly, and we quickly struck up a conversation. Mark and Lisa were celebrating their anniversary as well, and it turned out they had a lot in common with us. They had been married for the same amount of time, liked the same kinds of movies, and even had a similar sense of humor. We decided to spend more time together over the next few days. We did everything with Mark and Lisa. We went to the pool, played mini-golf, and even tried out the ship's rock-climbing wall. It was like we had known them forever. But as the days went by, I started to notice some odd things about them. For one, they never seemed to talk about their lives back home. Whenever we asked, they'd change the subject or give vague answers. One night, we decided to attend a dance party on the top deck. The music was loud, and everyone was having a great time. But as I glanced around, I noticed Mark and Lisa standing off to the side, just watching. They looked almost sad. I dismissed it, thinking maybe they were just tired or that dancing just wasn't their thing. The next day, things got even stranger. We were all lounging by the pool when I noticed a group of older passengers whispering and pointing at Mark and Lisa. Curious, I approached them and asked what was going on. They looked at me with wide eyes and said, "You know those two, don't you? They're the ones who disappeared from the cruise ship. It was over 10 years ago." My heart skipped a beat. Disappeared. That couldn't be right. Mark and Lisa were here with us, laughing and having a good time. I decided not to mention it to Debbie just yet. I didn't want to ruin our trip with what was probably just a misunderstanding. That evening, as my wife and I were getting ready for dinner, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. I decided to do some investigating. I went to the ship's library and found a computer with internet access. I typed in Mark and Lisa cruise ship disappearance and hit enter. To my horror, several news articles popped up. A couple named Mark and Lisa Taylor had indeed vanished from this very cruise line over about a decade ago. They were last seen on the top deck during a dance party, and no one had seen or heard from them since. Their disappearance had remained a mystery. I felt sick to my stomach. I had to tell Debbie. I rushed back to our cabin and explained everything. She was shocked and didn't know what to believe. We decided to ask Mark and Lisa that night and hopefully get some answers. We met them at the ship's lounge and tried to act normal. After a few drinks, I brought up the articles I had found. Their faces went pale, and they exchanged a nervous glance. "We can explain," Mark said quietly, "but you might not believe us." They told us they had been on this cruise years ago, just like us. They had been having a great time until one night, during the dance party, they felt a strange pull. They described feeling dizzy and disoriented, and the next thing they knew, they were no longer on the ship. They had been transported to a place they couldn't describe, a place that felt like a void. For years they had been stuck in that void, unable to escape. It was only recently that they had found a way back, but they didn't know how or why. They warned us that the same thing could happen to us if we weren't careful. Debbie and I were stunned. It sounded unbelievable, like something out of an old episode of The Twilight Zone. But the fear in their eyes was real. We decided to stick together for the rest of the trip, hoping that whatever had happened to them wouldn't happen to us. The next few days were tense. We tried to enjoy ourselves, but the looming fear was always there. One night, as we were all sitting on our balcony, the ship's power suddenly went out. The ocean was pitch black, and the only light came from the stars above. We ran into the ship's crew, who looked at us with confusion. They said there was no record of a couple named Mark and Lisa on board. It was as if they had never existed. We tried to explain what had happened, but no one believed us. The rest of the cruise was a blur. We stayed in our cabin, too scared to venture out. When we finally docked and got off the ship, we felt a huge sense of relief. But the experience had changed us. We couldn't stop thinking about Mark and Lisa and the void they had described. When we got home, we decided to do some more research, hoping to find anything to make sense of all of this. We discovered that there had been other disappearances on that cruise line over the years, all with similar circumstances. People would vanish without a trace, leaving their loved ones behind with no closure. To this day, Debbie and I still think about that trip. We never went on another cruise, and we rarely talk about what happened. But sometimes, late at night, I hear those whispers and feel that same pull. I don't know what it means, but I do know that there are things in this world we can't explain. It happened a few years ago when I went on a cruise with my family to celebrate my high school graduation. It was supposed to be a fun and relaxing trip, but it turned into something I'll never forget. It all started when we boarded the cruise ship. My parents, my younger sister Beth, and my younger brother Jimmy were all excited about the vacation. The ship was huge and beautiful, with lots of activities and places to explore. I was looking forward to spending time with my family and enjoying the ocean views. On the first day, we settled into our cabin and then went to explore the ship. We checked out the pool, the dining areas, and the entertainment options. Everything seemed perfect. But later that evening, I noticed something strange. There was a guy who seemed to be lurking around, watching people. The guy was in his late 20s with dark brown hair and a scruffy beard. He wore a baseball cap turned around to the back, and he kept glancing around nervously. I decided to ignore him and focus on having fun, but I kept getting the feeling that he was up to no good. The next day I saw him again. This time he was near the pool, watching people from a distance. He didn't seem interested in swimming or relaxing, he was just observing. I pointed him out to my mom, but she said that he was probably just shy or introverted. Still, I couldn't help but to feel something was off. Later that afternoon, while my family was playing mini-golf on the upper deck, I decided to explore the ship on my own. As I walked through the narrow hallways, I caught sight of the creepy guy again. He was standing near the entrance to one of the lounges, looking around suspiciously. I quickly turned and went in the opposite direction, hoping he wouldn't notice me. That evening, we went to a fancy dinner in the ship's main dining room. Everyone was dressed up and the atmosphere was lively and festive. But even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I scanned the room, and sure enough, there he was, sitting at a table in the corner, watching intently at my family and the other passengers. After dinner, my family and I went to see a show in the ship's theater. The performance was amazing, and for a while, I forgot all about the creepy guy. But as we were leaving the theater, there he was again, standing near the exit. He seemed to be watching everyone as they left. The next day, I decided to keep a closer eye on him. I wanted to figure out what he was up to. I saw him hanging around the pool again, then near the buffet, and later by the gift shops. He never seemed to interact with anyone. He was just always there, watching. That night, as we were getting ready for bed, I told my dad about the guy and how uncomfortable he was making me feel. My dad suggested that we keep our cabin door locked and be extra cautious with our belongings. He also said he would mention it to the ship's security team in the morning. I had trouble sleeping that night, feeling anxious and uneasy. Around 2 a.m., I heard a faint noise outside our cabin door. I got up and quietly peeked through the peephole. To my horror, I saw the creepy guy standing in the hallway, looking around nervously. I quickly woke up my dad, who called security. Security arrived within minutes and escorted the guy away. They assured us that they would investigate and keep an eye on him. I felt a little better, but I was still on edge. The next morning, we went to the pool as usual, trying to enjoy our vacation. I was relieved to see that the creepy guy was nowhere in sight. For the first time in days, I started to relax. But later that day, while I was alone in the ship's library, I saw him again. He was standing in the doorway watching me. My heart raced as I quickly gathered my things and left. I found my family and told them what happened. My dad immediately went to talk to security again. That evening, security came to our cabin and told us what they had discovered. The creepy guy was indeed a thief. He had been watching passengers, looking for opportunities to steal from them. They found stolen items in his cabin, including wallets, jewelry, and electronics. The security team assured us that he would be placed in their brig or the rest of the cruise and handed over to the authorities when we reached the next port. I felt a mix of relief and lingering fear. The thief had been caught, but the thought of how close we had come to being his next victims was terrifying. We decided to stay together as a family for the rest of the trip and be extra cautious. The next morning, we disembarked from the ship and watched as the authorities took the thief away. We were all glad to be back on solid ground and away from the danger. As we drove home, I couldn't stop thinking about how close we had come to being victims. The experience had been terrifying, but it had also taught me to trust my instincts and be aware of my surroundings. Looking back, I realize how lucky we were that nothing worse happened. It was a reminder that even in the most beautiful and seemingly safe places, danger can lurk just around the corner. I've got a story for you that still gives me chills when I think about it. A few years ago, I went on a cruise with a group of my best friends. We were all so excited for a girls' getaway trip, just a break from our busy lives. Most of my friends were in relationships or married, but I was single and secretly hoping to meet someone special on the trip. Unfortunately for me, the handsome guy I'd meet would turn out to be a nightmare. The first couple of days on the cruise were amazing. The ship was huge, with so many activities and places to explore. We spent our days lounging by the pool, sipping cocktails, and enjoying the sunshine. At night, we dressed up and went to the ship's fancy restaurants and bars. It was on the third night that I met him. My friends and I were in one of the ship's nightclubs, dancing and having a great time. That's when I noticed a guy watching me from across the room. He was tall, with dark hair and striking blue eyes. He smiled when our eyes met, and I felt a little thrill run through me. He looked so dreamy, like something out of a romance novel. He approached me, introduced himself as Alex, and we started talking. He was charming and funny, and we hit it off immediately. We danced for a while and I felt like I was floating on air. When the night ended, he walked me back to my cabin, and we exchanged numbers so we could meet up the next day. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about Alex. My friends teased me about my new crush, but I didn't mind. I was excited to see him again. We met up for breakfast and spent the day together, exploring the ship and getting to know each other. He told me he was on the cruise alone, looking for a break from his stressful job. Everything seemed perfect. A few dates in, I started noticing some strange things about Alex. He was always asking about my plans and where I would be at certain times. He seemed overly interested in my friends, asking a lot of questions about them. At first I thought he was just being friendly, but it started to feel a little off. One evening, my friends and I were getting ready for dinner when one of them, Sarah, pulled me aside. "Hey, I've been watching Alex and something about him doesn't sit right with me," she said. "He's always around, and I've seen him talking to other women on the ship too. I think you should be careful." I brushed off her concerns, thinking she was just being overprotective. But that night, as I lay in bed, I too started to think that something was wrong. I decided to play it safe and keep my distance from Alex for a while and see if anything else seemed off. The next day, I told Alex that I wanted to spend some time with my friends and couldn't hang out. He seemed disappointed but didn't push it. I spent the day with my friends, but I couldn't stop thinking about him. That night, we were all at the ship's theater, watching a show, when I noticed Alex sitting a few rows behind us, watching me intently. It was really strange and it kind of creeped me out. After the show, I told my friends what I saw. Sarah suggested we go to the ship's security and report Alex's strange behavior. At first, I hesitated, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that Sarah was right. Something was definitely off. We went to the security office and told them about Alex. They took our concerns seriously and said they would look into it. They asked us to be careful and report any further strange behavior. The next day, I didn't hear from Alex at all, and I felt a mix of relief and worry. Maybe he had been scared off by our report to security. But that evening, as I was getting ready for dinner, I received a text from him. "Meet me at the deck near the lifeboats. I really need to talk to you." I showed the text to Sarah and she insisted on coming with me. We made our way to the deck and there he was, waiting. His expression was different this time, more intense, almost desperate. "I need to talk to you alone," he said, but Sarah stood her ground. "Anything you have to say, you can say in front of me," she replied firmly. Alex's eyes flickered with anger for a moment, but he quickly masked it. "Fine," he said. "I wanted to apologize if I made you feel uncomfortable. I really like you and just wanted to spend time with you." Something about his tone didn't sit right with me, and I felt a sense of dread building up. I took a step back. "I think it's best if we keep our distance," I said. "Please don't contact me again." Alex's face darkened. "You're making a mistake," he hissed. "You'll regret this." Sarah and I quickly walked away, my heart pounding in my chest. When we were back in our cabin, I broke down in tears. "I'm so scared, Sarah. What if he does something?" "We'll keep an eye out," Sarah assured me. "We'll stick together and make sure you're never alone." The next couple of days were tense. I didn't see Alex around anywhere, but it still felt like he was there somewhere watching me. Then, on the last night of the cruise, something terrifying happened. We were all at the ship's main deck, enjoying the final night's festivities. The mood was festive, but I couldn't relax. I kept scanning the crowd, looking for any sign of Alex. Suddenly, Sarah grabbed my arm. "There he is," she whispered, pointing to a figure lurking near the edge of the deck. It was Alex, and he was watching us intently. My stomach churned with fear. We decided to go back to our cabin, but as we made our way through the crowded deck, I felt a hand grab my arm. I turned to see Alex's cold, angry eyes staring into mine. "You can't get away from me," he snarled. "I always get what I want." Panic ran through me, and I struggled to break free. Sarah screamed for help, and suddenly, security officers appeared out of nowhere, grabbing Alex and pulling him away from me. "He's been following us," Sarah yelled. "He's dangerous." The security officers quickly restrained Alex and took him away. We were escorted back to our cabin, where we were told to stay until they had dealt with him. Later that night, we were called to the security office and told the full story. Alex was indeed a dangerous man. He had been watching women on the ship, looking for vulnerable targets to rob and potentially traffic. Our report to security had led them to investigate further, and they had found stolen items and disturbing plans in his cabin. I was horrified and shaken to my core. The thought of what could have happened if Sarah hadn't been there to help me was terrifying. I hugged my friends tightly, grateful for their quick thinking and support. As the ship docked the next morning, I was so relieved. We disembarked, and I couldn't wait to get home and put the whole ordeal behind me. The experience had been terrifying, but it also taught me to trust my instincts and be cautious, even in seemingly safe places. Looking back, I'm grateful for my friends and the quick actions of the ship's security team. It was a reminder that danger can be anywhere, and it's important to stay vigilant and look out for each other. Thanks for watching. Don't miss out on more spine-chilling tales. Subscribe now for weekly scares. Hit that red button and join our journey into the unknown.